I want you to close your eyes for a second. Picture this. You're standing on the very edge of an aircraft carrier deck. It is the middle of the night, pitch black, no moon, just the dark abyss of the ocean. The deck is heaving up and down below your feet. The wind is screaming across the metal at 40 knots. And out in the darkness, there is a $40 million fighter jet hurling towards you at 150 miles an hour.
That is high stakes. I mean, that's about as high stakes as aviation gets.
Exactly. Now, you're the landing signal officer, the LSO. You have a split second to make a call that determines life or death. Is that pilot going to catch the number 3 wire, or are they going to smash into the ramp? So here's the question I want to start with. What are you looking at? Are you trying to squint through the darkness to read their airspeed indicator?
Definitely not. No way. If you're that LSO, you don't care about the dial in the cockpit. You honestly don't even care what the pilot thinks their speed is. You're looking at the angle. You're looking at the geometry of the plane against the air. You're looking at raw physics.
Because the speed might lie, but the angle doesn't.
Precisely.
But now, let's snap back to reality. Let's go to a sunny Tuesday afternoon. A student pilot, maybe someone like me, is turning base to final in a beat-up, trusting Cessna 172. We aren't looking at the geometry. We aren't looking at the physics. We are glued to that airspeed indicator. We're thinking, okay, the needle is in the green, I'm safe. Needle in the white, I'm slow.
And that right there, that is the disconnect. That's the dangerous gap we're diving into today, because that student staring at a safe airspeed could actually be 2 seconds away from a spin that they cannot recover from.
That is a terrifying thought. Welcome to this special edition of the Deep Dive. We are calling this Students in Aviation, and today we're tackling the invisible danger. We're looking at why our obsession with airspeed might be getting us killed, and why the manuals are practically screaming at us to change how we fly.
It's a shift in mindset. It really is. It's fundamental.
Yeah.
We're drilled on speed equals life from day one of ground school. And sure, energy is life. I'm never going to tell you energy is bad. But speed does not guarantee that the wing is actually flying. Today we're going to unpack a concept that sounds like dry engineering, but is actually about survival. Angle of attack.
AOA.
AOA. And we're going to look at why there's such a huge gap between what the textbooks say and what we actually feel in the cockpit.
I have to be honest with you, this topic keeps me up at night as I'm working through my own ratings. I memorize the stall speeds for the written test. I know the numbers. VO0 is this, VS1 is that.
All right.
But then I look at the data coming out of the FAA,
Yeah.
and I realize that relying on those memorized numbers is, oh, it's kind of a trap.
It is a trap, and it's a trap that has caught a lot of very experienced pilots, not just students. We aren't just talking about rookies here. The mission today is simple. We want to debunk the myth that going fast means you won't stall.
Which is a very hard myth to shake. When I'm flying, if that airspeed needle is high, I feel relaxed. My shoulders drop. If it drops near the red line, I get nervous. That gauge is my security blanket.
And my job today is to take that blanket away, or at least show you why it's full of holes. But don't worry, we'll replace it with something much sturdier by the end of this deep dive.
Let's get into the physics first. We hear angle of attack all the time. The textbook definition from the PHAK is the angle between the chord line of the wing and the relative wind. Which, to be honest, sounds like something I'd read on a PowerPoint slide while falling asleep in a dark classroom.
It does. It's technically accurate, but it's completely useless when you're upside down or bouncing through turbulence. You can't visualize a chord line when you're busy flying the airplane. So let's get out of the cockpit for a second. Let's make this tangible.
Okay, I'm ready.
Have you ever been driving down the highway and stuck your hand out the window?
Oh, absolutely. The classic surfing the wind game. I think everyone has done that.
Everyone does. And that is the best aerodynamics lab you will ever experience. It's better than a wind tunnel because you can feel it. Think about what your hand is doing. If you hold it flat, fingers pointing forward, parallel to the road, what do you feel?
Not much. It just slices through the air. You feel the wind rushing past, but no real force pushing it up or down.
Right. Low resistance. Smooth airflow, that is a low angle of attack. Now, rotate your wrist, tilt the front of your hand, your fingertips up just a little bit. What happens?
You feel the wind catch it immediately, pushes your hand up and back, you get lift.
Precisely. You've increased the angle of attack, you're deflecting more air down, so Newton's laws take over and your hand goes up. But here is the critical part, the part that kills pilots. What happens if you get greedy? What happens if you tilt your hand up too steep, say 45 degrees?
It stops lifting. It just snaps back. The wind slams it backward.
Yeah.
It feels like you lost your grip on the air.
That is the stall. The air can no longer flow smoothly over the top of your hand. your wing. It separates, it becomes turbulent, and the lift just quits. Now, I want you to really focus on this next part because it is the million-dollar fact. That point where your hand snaps back, that specific angle,
Yeah.
it never changes.
Wait, really? It never changes?
Never. For a given wing design, the critical angle of attack is a constant. It's usually somewhere between, 16 and 18 degrees. It doesn't matter if the car is going 50 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 pounds of luggage in the trunk. It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold. If you exceed that angle, the wing quits flying, period.
See, that's where it gets really interesting to me. Because in my head, and I think for a lot of learners, we equate the stall with getting too slow. We think the stall happens because the air stops or isn't moving fast enough over the wing. But you're saying I could be going 150 knots screaming fast and still stall if I hit that angle.
Absolutely. You can stall at any airspeed, any attitude, and that is where the lie of airspeed comes in. The old naval aviator texts make this point very clearly. It explains that the airspeed at which you stall changes constantly.
Because the airspeed indicator is just a measurement of ram air pressure, essentially. It's not measuring lift directly.
Right. The airspeed at which the wing gives up changes based on how heavy the plane is. It changes based on your center of gravity. And most importantly for today's discussion, it changes based on G-loading.
The G-loading part is what scares me. I was reading through an FAA flyer on angle of attack awareness, and they talk about the steep turn trap. This seems to be where people get into trouble.
It is a classic scenario. It's the base to final turn, but it can happen anywhere. Canyon flying, pattern work, you name it.
So let's walk through the physics of that trap so we can visualize it. You're in a steep turn. Let's say you overshot the runway centerline because of a tailwind, so you bank hard to correct 45 or 60 degrees. You have to pull back on the yoke to keep the nose upright.
Right, because when you bank, you lose some of your vertical lift component. Gravity is still pulling you straight down, but your lift is now pointing off to the side. So you have to create more total lift just to stay level. And how do you create more lift? You increase the angle of attack, you pull back.
But because you're banking and pulling, you're pulling Gs. You are making the airplane effectively heavier.
Exactly. If you pull 2 Gs in a 60-degree bank, your airplane now effectively weighs twice as much. If you're in a 2,000-pound plane, the wings are now trying to support 4,000 pounds.
And the sources say that in this situation, the stall speed skyrockets.
It does. And here's the kicker, the thing that catches people off guard. Because the wing is working so hard, the stall speed goes up by the square root of the load factor. You don't need to know the math, you just need to know the result. You might be flying 20 or 30 knots above your normal wings level stall speed.
So you look at the airspeed indicator, and it's well into the green. It says 100 knots. You think, I'm fast, I'm safe.
It says safe. But you're banking, you're pulling, the wing is screaming for relief, and suddenly, snap, the wing gives up.
The document mentions something about the stall sequence being condensed. That word really stuck with me. Condensed, it sounds violent.
That is a terrifying description, isn't it?
No.
But it's so accurate. In a normal, lazy practice stall, the kind you do with your instructor at 3,000 feet, you gently pull back. You get the buffet, the warning horn, the mushy controls. You have time to think, oh, I should recover now. It's almost polite.
Right, it gives you a polite tap on the shoulder.
Exactly. But in a high G steep turn stall, that warning buffer disappears. The progression from flying to falling happens in a fraction of a second. It's violent. The wing reaches that critical angle and just snaps. It sheds its lift instantly.
And because you're in a turn, you don't just drop the nose straight ahead like in training.
No. One wing usually stalls before the other because of the turn. So you roll, usually over the top into a spin. And if you were turning base to final, you're maybe only 500 or 800 feet above the ground.
You don't have altitude to recover.
You have zero margin. By the time you realize what happened, by the time you say, what was that? You're impacting the terrain.
This feels like a massive design flaw in how we are taught to fly, or at least in the instruments we are given. We have this invisible limit, the critical angle of attack, and we have an instrument, the airspeed indicator, that effectively lies to us about where that limit is. So why don't we have a gauge for the thing that actually matters?
Yeah.
Why don't we all have an angle of attack indicator?
That is the question of the decade. And the answer, historically, has been cost and culture.
I noticed in the naval aviator sources, they talk about Navy jets having AOA indicators since the beginning.
Right. For the Navy, it was essential. When you're landing on a carrier, you need absolute precision. You need to be at the exact optimum lift to catch that wire without, breaking the gear or floating over the wires. They couldn't afford to guess with airspeed. But in general aviation, your Cessnas, your Pipers, we just didn't have that tech. It was seen as military stuff or jet stuff.
But according to the recent FAA briefings, that's changing fast. The FAA and the GAJSC are really pushing for these now.
They are. They realize that loss of control in flight is the #1 killer in general aviation. It kills more pilots than engine failures or mid-airs, so the regulations have been streamlined. It used to be a nightmare of paperwork to install a new gauge. Now they've made it much easier and cheaper to retrofit these.
It's interesting how they describe it. They don't just call it a stall warner. They call it a visual representation of the energy management state.
That is a much better way to think about it. It's not just an idiot light that flashes when you're about to die. It's a gauge, like a gas gauge. It tells you, hey, here's how much lift potential you have left. It tells you how much money is in the bank.
So if I'm in that steep turn pulling G's, the airspeed indicator might say 100 knots safe, but the AOA indicator would be showing me I'm in the red.
Exactly. It cuts through all the math. It doesn't care how heavy you are. It doesn't care about density altitude. It doesn't care if you're pulling 2Gs or 4Gs. It just tells you the truth about the wing. It's looking at the air, not the ground.
That seems like a no-brainer for safety. I mean, if
Yeah.
I could see my lift reserve on a dial, I'd feel a lot better about that base to final turn. But tech is only half the battle, right?
Right.
We have to talk about the pilot, the human holding the stick.
The human element, this is where things get messy. Because even with the best instruments, our brains are wired to do the wrong thing when we get scared.
I was reading Advisory Circular 120-109A, which deals with stall prevention.
Hmm.
And it talks a lot about the startle effect.
Hmm.
This really resonated with me because when I practice stalls with my instructor, I know it's coming. We climb up, we clear the area. He says, okay, let's do a power off stall. I'm ready.
Right, you're primed. Your adrenaline is managed, you know the procedure. But real stalls in the wild, they are never planned. They happen when you are looking for traffic or when your passenger drops their phone or when ATC is yelling at you.
And the circular mentions that when a pilot is startled, the instinct, the lizard brain reaction, is to pull back.
It is the exact opposite of what you need to do. If the ground is getting big in the window or if the plane feels weird and sluggish, your instinct screams, pull up, get away from the ground. But if you are stalled or near a stall, pulling back just deepens it. It creates more angle, more drag, and less lift. It seals your fate.
The sources call this loss of control in flight, or LOCI. It seems like training tries to beat this out of us, but the startle effect can override years of training in a second.
It can. That is why the FAA is emphasizing prevention over recovery now. If you're recovering, you have already failed at prevention. We want to recognize the signs before the horn goes off. We want to see the AOA climbing before it hits the critical point.
Speaking of failing at prevention, there was a really interesting, slightly terrifying note in a recent safety briefing about checklists. It was talking about off-the-shelf checklists.
Oh, the checklist trap. This is a big one. You buy a nice laminated quick reference card online because the POH, the actual pilot's operating handbook, is thick and clunky.
Yeah, the third-party ones are color-coded and fit on your kneeboard. They look professional, but the briefing mentions an accident where a pilot used one and landed with the gear up because the gear down step it wasn't there.
Or, relevant to our topic, it might skip a specific stall recovery input that the manufacturer tested. Every plane is slightly different. Some need power immediately. Some need the nose down first to break the stall. The lesson here is, don't invent your own physics. The people who built the airplane know how to get it out of a stall. Trust their flow.
This brings up a debate that I saw in another briefing. It was about MCA, minimum controllable airspeed. I have to admit, I hated practicing MCA.
Well, most students do. It's miserable. The plane feels awful. The controls are sloppy. The stall horn is constantly chirping. It feels like the plane is balancing on the head of a pin.
Exactly. It feels sketchy. I remember sweating through my shirt every time we did it. And apparently, there was a debate about removing it from the test.
There was. Some people argued it wasn't a real maneuver. Why fly that slow if you don't have to? But the instructors and the safety experts fought to keep it, and they were right.
Why? Why force us to be uncomfortable?
Because you need to know what that sketchy feeling is. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. If the first time you feel that mushy, wobbling wing is when you are turning base to final with your family in the back, you are going to panic. You're going to freeze or pull. MCA bridges the gap between the theory of AOA and the tactile reality of a struggling wing.
So it's about desensitizing the fear so you can think clearly.
It's about familiarity. If you know what the edge of the cliff looks like and feels like, you are less likely to fall off it by accident. You learn to respect the edge without fearing it blindly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about the physics, the tech, and the training, but we need to talk about the ultimate consequence. There was a statistic in the September 2025 safety briefing that just stopped me cold.
I think I know the one you mean. Spatial disorientation.
Yes. The study said that spatial D accidents have a 94% fatality rate. 94%. Compared to something like 19% for general accidents. That is effectively a death sentence.
It is, and we have to connect this back to stalls. Spatial D usually happens when a VFR pilot flies into clouds or bad weather. They lose the horizon, they lose their visual reference.
And when you lose the horizon, your inner ear starts lying to you.
It lies convincingly. Your vestibular system isn't designed for flight. You might feel like you are flying straight and level, but you are actually in a slow spiral dive.
So what happens? You see the airspeed increasing because you're diving.
Or you just feel the pressure. You sense something is wrong, and your brain says, pull up. But because you're banked in a spiral, pulling back just tightens the turn. The G-load increases, the stall speed shoots up, and you stall the airplane without ever seeing it coming. You stall at high speed while disoriented.
This brings us back to upset prevention and recovery training. It says the key takeaway is early recognition. If the instruments and your gut disagree,
Trust the instruments. Always trust the instruments. And this brings us full circle. If you have an angle of attack indicator, trust that above everything else, because your airspeed indicator might be confusing you in a spiral. It might be showing high speed, making you think you can't stall. Your artificial horizon might be tumbled. But the AOA simply tells you, is the wing flying or is it not?
it's the ultimate truth teller in the cockpit. It cuts through the sensory illusions.
It really is. It's your anchor when everything else is spinning. It's the one gauge that is directly connected to the aerodynamics of the wing, ignoring all the other noise.
So, bringing this all together, we started with the idea that speed equals safety. And I think we've pretty thoroughly dismantled that.
We have. Speed helps, certainly. Energy is good. But AOA is the law.
If we look at the mission for this deep dive, students in aviation, what is the one thing you want our listeners to take away? If they are sitting in that Cessna tomorrow, what should change in their scan?
Don't just stare at the airspeed needle. Learn to feel the wing. Listen to the sound of the wind. Does it change pitch? Feel the controls. Are they stiff and responsive or loose and mushy? That is your wing talking to you.
And if you own a plane, or if you're looking at a flight school, maybe ask about AOA indicators.
Absolutely. It is cheaper than a new wing, and it is certainly cheaper than a life. It gives you that stall margin awareness. It lets you see the invisible. It's an investment in the future of your flying.
There's a great quote from the old naval text that I think sums up the mindset we should have. It's the creed of the professional instrument pilot.
Attitude plus power equals performance.
It's so simple. If you set the pitch, the attitude, and you set the throttle, the power, the plane will do the same thing every time. It takes the guesswork out.
It does. Stop chasing the needles and start flying the attitude. If you have the right attitude and the right power, the airspeed will take care of itself.
Before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with a final thought from one of those safety briefings. It's a bit of a meme, but it's surprisingly deep. The weather rock.
Ah, yes. The rock on a string. A classic at small imports.
For those who haven't seen it, it's a sign next to a rock hanging on a string at an airport. It says, if rock is wet, it's raining. If rock is swinging, it's windy. If rock is white, it's snowing.
It's primitive, sure. It's a joke, but it's 100% accurate.
And the briefing makes the point that sometimes we overcomplicate flying. We have iPads and synthetic vision and complex forecasts. We are drowning in data. But sometimes you just need the rock.
And in aerodynamics, angle of attack is the weather rock. It doesn't care about the math. It doesn't care about the theory. It just tells you, is the rock swinging? Is the wing flying? Or is it about to quit?
Sometimes the simplest tool is the one that saves you.
Couldn't agree more. Keep it simple, keep it safe.
That's it for this deep dive into the invisible dangers of flight. Fly safe, keep the blue side up, and watch your angle.
And trust your instruments. See you next time.